All right, we are recording.
Hello, Alliance members. My name is Leslie Wagner. I am the first Vice President for the Ohio Local History Alliance, and I'm also the co-chair for the Outreach Committee. And every summer, the Outreach Committee likes to bring at least one workshop to our members based off of their feedback that we receive every single year. And this is directly based off of our outreach project that we did over the winter, where the Outreach Committee at least tried to attempt to call every single member site. And at least from the ones that I talked to, this is what I kept hearing over and over and over again was, we can't attract the younger generation. We cannot attract the next generation. And a lot of sites are struggling with that. So thankfully, we had AmeriCorps step in to bring this presentation for you today. And at this point, I will throw it over to them. And I thank them so much for their hard work.
Thank you, Leslie. So today we're going to be talking about attracting young people to your organization as interns, members, volunteers, and board members. So first off, we'll introduce ourselves. We are all members of AmeriCorps' Ohio History Service Corps, and we serve in various regions throughout Ohio. I'm Amanda Wakowiak. I'm in Region 9, and my host site is Shawnee State University.
Hello, my name is Chloe Dixon. I'm the Region 6 Local History member at the Ohio History Connection.
My name is Marissa Ham, and I am the Region 3 Local History member at the Oberlin Heritage Center.
And I'm Ingrid Buckley, and I am the history member in Region 9 at the Southeast Ohio History Center.
Okay, so now that you all know who we are all in the young people category. And so we are quite qualified to talk about this. And what we mean when we talk about young people, generally we're looking at Gen Z or Gen Y. Those are the categories that have been sort of developed to talk about people born between 1981 and 1996 for Gen Y or millennials. And then Gen Z is between 1997 and 2015. And I would be considered Gen Y. And I definitely had a flip phone and a Game Boy. So we have several categories here that we are sort of considering when we talk about, like, how do you bring young people into your institution? You want to first off prepare. Why do you want young people involved at your institution, and how? You want to propose how you're going to attract these younger participants, and where can you find candidates? You also want to talk about how you can provide for them. You know, what are they looking for, and what can they do for you in return? And then you also want to provide praise, like how do you appreciate the people who are involved and create a welcoming environment? So of course, we're going to start off with preparing for bringing young people into your institution. So first off, the big question to consider is, why do you want young people? Like, what can a young person bring to your organization? What goals or positions or jobs are you looking to fulfill? And are you looking for an intern, a volunteer, or even a board member? So what you want to do is create a job description. This ensures that both parties are aware of the expectations of what you're bringing them in to do or what you want them to come do. And when you create a job description, you're creating specific requirements that'll sort of pertain to, like, the interest of people who might want to come to your institution, and it narrows the focus to make best use of everyone's time. So you're tailoring what you expect to what prospective people might be looking for. So like with any job description, you want to include specific duties and expectations. Are you looking for a student, or are you looking for someone who's perhaps in their professional career? Do they need to have a degree? Are they an undergrad, a grad student, a high school student? Do they not need a degree for what sort of program you're looking to fill? You also want to talk about what sorts of duties they would be expected to to do in their position. So are you looking at specific requirements for like training? Like, are you looking for duties that would require specific training that would be covered under a degree, or somebody who's training for a degree? And then you also want to look at a timeline. So is this going to be a summer internship? Or do you have a specific project that's going to happen in a specific period of time? So like if you have a 6-month exhibit project that you're working on. You also want to look at benefits and compensations. This is a good thing to be transparent about when you're creating a job description, because young people want to know, what am I going to get in return for what I am providing for you? This could be anything from work experience or professional development. You may also be providing some sort of class credit if an internship, for example, is required for their degree. You could also be providing networking opportunities if you know others in the field and they're looking to get into the field as well. You could offer perks such as free parking, free admission to events or exhibits. A flexible schedule is always a bonus when we're talking about young people. They have busy schedules, they may be students, they may be working. So you need to be able to have that flex time to sort of, what works for them and what they have going on as well. And you should also consider monetary compensation, because interns in particular should be paid. And we're going to get into that in the next slide. So when we talk about internships, we're usually talking about what could be considered the equivalent of a full-time job. It takes the same amount of time, of energy and dedication as a job. And you're usually, taking on a person who has a specific set of skills, or they're developing a specific set of skills and training. And they have probably gone to school for this, and they're probably, if they're a college student, they're probably paying a lot of money for this. So compensation can help, monetary compensation can help offset the time that they would be spending at a job to perhaps earn money to pay for said education. In general, offering monetary compensation will allow for a more diverse group of students. Not everyone will have time for an unpaid internship if they're also juggling a job in school or other obligations. And money can be tight, especially if, for nonprofit organizations like historical institutions. And, so it's good to start planning for the possibility of paying for an intern if this is the route that you wish to go. So you can look for grants that may be available and that would support a stipend for an intern. And you could also consider adding a budget line in your annual budget that would automatically include compensation for any potential interns. So you may also consider bringing young people into your organization by, asking them to be a board member. And of course, whenever you are adding new people to the board, it's good to consider what your institution's bylaws and policies say. So, just be up to date on, how should we bring a new person in. But other than that, like a board member is seen as a position of sort of respect. And, there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with being a board member. And so that could be seen as intimidating if for a young person who's potentially never been in a position of power like that before. So it's always a good idea to create an onboarding packet so that you can show, okay, here are the duties of the position, kind of like a job description, and our operating procedures, make them feel like, hey, this is how we run things, and make them, have them feel sort of like welcomed in, like give them a tour of the facility and make sure they understand, what sorts of things you all have going on. A lot of times, being a board member comes with some sort of dues, like a monetary gift to the institution. But it's important to consider that, support can be shown through ways other than monetary donation. And I have on here doers, donors, and door openers, because requiring a monetary donation isn't always feasible. We just talked about like all of the monetary places that money is going for young people, and we'll get into that more later as well. So like it may not be feasibly possible for someone to donate money, or at least not donate a large amount of money regularly. So, you could think about, how can you offer support to the institution in other ways? So by doing, are they always active within the institution? Are they doing docent work? Are they helping with exhibits? Are they doing promotional materials, social media, or are they a door opener, which is the type of person who would, provide networking? Do they know other groups in the community that could help provide services? Like, do they know the catering business down the street that could get you a discount at your next big event? So consider things like that as a form of support, and then the fact that it doesn't always have to be monetary. And then also be aware of the fact that, new people bring new ideas, and it may not always be, they may upset the status quo, because, new people aren't, they're going to want to share ways that they think they could elevate the institution. And it's important to be open to that change and consider it, because you never know, there might be some great ideas lurking behind the new people. So another important consideration is time. So when you're bringing in like an intern or a volunteer, how much time do you want them to spend at the institution, and when do you want them to come in and do whatever projects you have assigned to them? So like we talked about before, there may be some sort of deadline, like an exhibit opening. So everything needs to be done before a certain date. And you may have a deadline on the other end of things. If it's an intern, they may only be available during their 3-month summer break. Or that it may also be like an hourly deadline. Like I have class at this time, I can only be here for 6 hours. So take that into consideration. Also consider, weekdays versus weekends versus like evenings. So during the weekdays, young people are going to work, they're going to school. In the evenings, they may have family obligations. They may be a caregiver to an older family member or to children. And so these are things that require their time as well. And they may, need to work around these things. And the schedule needs to work for both the institution and the young volunteer or intern or whatever position they're filling. So it's important to communicate clearly on the time expectations. So we've talked about preparing to approach a young person, or advertising that you're looking for young people to fill positions at your institution. But what if a young person approaches you? The basic answer is to be prepared, and also be enthusiastic, be excited. This person is approaching you for, a volunteer position or an internship position. So basically interview them. What sort of experience are they looking for? Are they an intern? Are they a volunteer? Are they looking to fill class credit? And also ask, why are they interested in your organization? If they're approaching you, it's probably because they had like a great experience as a kid, or they really like, what you're putting out there, and they want to contribute as well. Also consider, do you have projects fitting their interests and their criteria for, what they're looking for? And be honest, because you don't want to waste time by saying, yeah, we want a young person, and then you don't have anything for them to do. And if you don't have a project, that's fine, but maybe you still want to build that relationship with them. So keep them on the email list, let them know when tours and exhibits are happening, invite them to board meetings or like town hall style meetings, so that you can show, look, we're still interested even though we don't have any projects for you at this time. And this is also where building relationships with other institutions can become crucial, because even if you don't have a project, you may know the historical society down down the street does have a project, and you can send them over there. And then in return, that same group may find interns and volunteers that they can't necessarily take on at this time, and they'll send them over to you. So that can be a helpful bonus to having good relationships with other groups in the area. So it's important to remember that having young people, interns, volunteers, whatever, it's important to remember that this is a reciprocal relationship. You have specific goals and projects that you are looking to fulfill, and you're looking for someone to help fulfill them. In return, the young person that you are approaching or has approached you also has goals and expectations, and you need to think about how you can fill them as well. So it's a big circle of life kind of deal. And if you can keep everyone happy, then you're probably going to get, people returning to your institution for more volunteer experiences, and they may even send volunteers and interns your way as well. So as a young person, I also have intern and volunteer experience, which I will speak about here briefly. As a graduate student, I was earning my master's in public history, and I was looking for experience in a museum and archival setting. I needed an internship as part of my graduation requirements, and I needed to log a certain number of hours, and I had to carefully document everything that I was doing, because I needed to show what I was working on and why it was impactful in the museum field. And so those are my requirements that I was looking for in an internship. And I approached a museum, a small to mid-sized museum that I had worked with previously as a student. I took a class there where I helped develop an exhibit. And I really liked working with them. I knew all the people who worked at the institution. I really liked them. I liked their vibe. I liked what they were putting out into the world. And they had a relationship with the university because they were holding classes there as well. So everything was already set up for me in terms of yes, they would be able to help me with documentation requirements for my degree. I was an unpaid intern, but that was by my choice. They did have paid internships, but they had a limited number of them because of budgetary restraints. But I knew that I wanted to intern for them. And so it was my choice to say, I don't need any financial support at this time, and I can afford to do this internship without being paid. I got a variety of experiences interning for this institution. I got to work on existing projects that they were working through, like they had some inventory projects and some rehousing projects. And I was also able to work on things that they sort of developed for me and what I was looking for with my requirements for my degree. So I got to work on a specific jewelry rehousing and inventory project with cataloging and ID tag marking and stuff like that. And it was really fun because I love working with jewelry. So that is it for me, and we will move on to Chloe. She will talk about proposing a program.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. That was great. So when it comes to proposing, you have done the job of preparing it. And this section, I will say, is for the expectation that this might be your first time hosting a volunteer or an intern, but we'll walk through interns first. All right, so finding the right fit. This is what happens when you have a good job description, but as you might know, you can prepare all the signage and some people still don't really understand what you're trying to say. So here's some extra steps you can take to really make sure it's clear what you are looking for. So if you're looking for interns, specifically high school interns, first place you can look is the actual local high school you have. Oftentimes high schools will either have a dedicated staff member for internships or job opportunities for high school students. Other times you have high school students who are seekers themselves, and so they will come and find you. Now, not every student goes to your local high school, so also private schools can have something like this. Sometimes there's even just a really above and beyond history teacher or social studies teacher who will have this connection with you as a museum and can pass along student names who might be interested in this opportunity. Homeschoolers are also out there, sometimes not easy to find. There are homeschool co-ops, which are different homeschool families who kind of help through the educational journey together. And so you can oftentimes find a local co-op and just give a heads up of you have an internship opportunity, and that will let multiple families know at once what's going on. You can also attract applicants through job boards, through word of mouth, or even local fairs. So whether that's a county fair or a job or internship fair. And I will say, as we went back to paid versus unpaid internships, internships can go on job boards, but most of the time, people who are looking on job boards are looking for a salary as well. And so if you post an unpaid internship on a job board, you might not get as many applicants looking through that way. College interns are very popular. Most colleges and universities have a career center or career services, or they'll have a place that will host a job or internship fair where there's tons of opportunities all in one spot. This is a point where you can get face-to-face people right in front of you to get interest, or you can just have kind of someone volunteer their time to talk to students about your organization there. If you don't have that type of time, or because of COVID, maybe it's not happening right away, you can also go online. LinkedIn is a great spot. Facebook, whether that's on your institution's Facebook page or a local group. Muse Weekly is an email newsletter brought to you by the Museum Studies Department at the University of Delaware that thousands of young professionals are signed up to and looking for opportunities through there. The Ohio Museums Association also has an internship board, as well as the National Council for Public History. They have a job board. It's very popular. So if it's not listed here, there's more, trust me. You can also have a flyer on site, or you can post it at local spots with bulletin boards. This is especially good if you are just starting out, and so you want someone who will really work with you to develop this internship program with you, is if you get an intern who is already invested in your institution. This is a picture of me while I was an intern in college at the Library of Congress. And as you can see, this is one of those situations where the experience is part of the reward. I'm holding the Lincoln Bible, and that opportunity I found online through USA Jobs. So when people apply, who's getting those applications? So one thing to note is emails, they do tend to stay around even if the person is gone. So let's say John Doe right now, he wants an intern for his collections department, but next year, maybe John's not going to be the one with an intern. Maybe it's going to be Jane in the programming department. Well, you might want to get an email that's more generalized of like an info email address, because they're like word of mouth, it does kind of travel that like, oh, I heard that John was looking for interns last year. You might want to send him an email and see if he has any opportunities. And then for years to come, even though he doesn't have an internship available, he's still getting inquiries. Whereas if you send them to a general email address, you can kind of then forward it to people within the organization of who actually is looking for the organization. But if you're a small site, maybe it is better to just send it to one person. And if it's an old email address, it's an old email address. Things happen. The other thing to note when you're offering interviews or getting people to apply is what interview process do you want to have? Sometimes people like to give 2 interviews. So a preliminary interview with just 1 or 2 members from your site, and then a bigger interview with more people. And so this way, not everyone from the organization is giving up an afternoon that they could have. You just have a couple people or one person giving this preliminary interview. And if it goes well, it moves forward. But that does take time. So maybe you do just want to have one interview. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're also proposing. And then the other thing is, how will they apply? Some people like to have very thorough applications. You really want to get a good feel for the person. But as many questions as you ask, remember, you will have to dedicate the time to reading the answers. And then where can I apply? So this one, just so you know, you can do both. There are perks to both, but sometimes you just like one or the other. So online applications, they are typically used by younger people more. It is a lot faster to look for jobs online than going place to place in person. It's easier for digital communications. The person can just fill out the application and email it, almost as soon as it's done. It can broaden your search. So for example, I'm a member of the Ohio History Service Corps, but I'm originally from Pennsylvania. Found this application online. It can also be shared. And so if you have an application posted, someone can post that on their social media for you and it can spread. But just know if it's online, it needs to be submitted somewhere, whether that's an email address or maybe it's a Google form that stores the data there. And if you post the application somewhere, just remember that you have an application posted where people can find it. So you might have to pull it down, like make a note, like remove this application from the internet at some point in time. Or, if John Doe's email address is on the application, make sure that that's pulled and updated. With paper, one perk is that it can be completed right away. Meaning if you're at a job or internship fair and you're meeting potential interns, you can give them an application right then and there. And there might be a higher chance that they'll actually fill out the application and give it back rather than saying, go online, fill this out and send it to me. You might lose some applicants in that time. But as with online stuff, it does need to be kept in a safe spot. I say this because I've been in situations where I go into the back office and there's someone's application with their address, their age, school information, which should be confidential, just laying on someone's desk. So just know if you collect applications, make sure that they're in a safe spot. Also because that is the one only application. So if something happens to their contact information, it's gone. So other things they can be eye catchers. So if you just leave them on your table or on your desk at your institution, people can know right away, like, oh, I can apply for something right here. And again, this is really good for localized places. It attracts the people who are already there and have an interest in your site because they are there. Volunteers. So especially with high school students, there are service organizations. So like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, the National Honor Society. Those programs really push volunteering, whether that's through offering service awards, scholarships for students who volunteer, or just kind of the core values that they promote. Some high schools have also adopted very, blanking on the words, very rigorous requirements for graduation, whether that's doing community service hours, getting volunteering hours, whether that's for a school award or for graduation. So don't think that, if you want a high school student, they need to be your intern. They can also volunteer. So this is me with a couple that own a bookstore, and I did my gold award at their bookstore. And like Amanda said, like interns, it's close to a full-time job. Volunteers, you can get them as, it's a big spectrum of how often they can be involved in your organization. Excellent. Awesome. One thing to note when looking for volunteers specifically, it's important to note their interest level. And one warning sign is if the parent is asking you if you have volunteer opportunities for their child. A teen volunteer should reach out to you themselves. They should have some interest in your site or work. It can be kind of obvious when they're just dragged by mom or dad to see if there's an opportunity for them to get out of the house. Another thing that you can do sometimes you can tell just through handwriting and such that someone has signed their child up as a volunteer. And that's when you can just give a phone call and ask to speak to the person applying directly. One of my former supervisors at a site, he had a mom come in, say, "Oh, do you have volunteer opportunities?" I said, "Yes, we do." She goes, "Oh, great. My son is in high school and he's looking for things, places he could volunteer. And this looks like a great place." And so he said, "Yes, if your child has an interest, volunteering here, you can have him contact me and I'd be happy to talk to him directly." Because if the parent is signing up, you're just not sure if the student is actually going to be wanting to be helpful to your site or not. Some things that you can put on your applications, you can think, what will the volunteer want to know? And so these are some ways that you can answer the questions that they might have. There's all kinds of different volunteer programs, especially for high schoolers. I've seen programs that do like short-term volunteer opportunities, long-term volunteer opportunities, and special event volunteer opportunities. So that way, if a student, only wants to volunteer for like 3 months at first, because they don't know if they'll like it, they can only volunteer for 3 months, and you can, talk about it afterwards. Sometimes students know right away, like, hey, this year I need to get volunteer hours in. I'd like to volunteer all year round, so they can be a long-term volunteer. Other times students, they might be brand new to your site and they might be brand new to volunteering. And so it might be good to just have a special events intern where they can come be a greeter for you at your events. They can help you get set up or take down the event, but it's only the special events that they volunteer for. I put in here, is there a uniform? Now, this isn't something that necessarily has to go on the application, but it should be expressed when you're asking the person to be a volunteer or intern, whether the dress is casual, whether volunteers, as a bonus, get a free t-shirt that they wear while they're volunteering, that type of thing. It's just helpful. Oddly enough, it is one of the most, asked questions that people ask themselves internally is, what do I wear? The other thing to note on the application is, just be truthful in who they'll be interacting with. You might have someone who's actually doing the applications and the interview process, but they have someone else supervising them. So you might just want to make it a heads up, like, hey, just so you know, I'll be collecting the application, but you'll be interviewing with this person. Or if they're volunteering and it's with the public, you might just want to say that, hey, just so you know, as a volunteer, you'll be representing our institution to the public. Or if it's more behind the scenes, just say, hey, just so you know, this is a behind the scenes internship. So you'll be working, by yourself sometimes, or, with just a few people in the office. You won't get too much public interaction. Next slide. So that's like more for a thorough volunteer application, and it can also go for internship applications. Sometimes though, with volunteers, since they are volunteering their time, you're a lot more flexible. You don't want to have a very rigorous volunteer program, and that's fine too. It's just important that you just know what the volunteer is interested in, how often they're around, what their availability is like. And then any non-negotiables you might have. Is there a required number of hours or days? Do they need a background check? Do they need to sign an agreement form or a waiver just to protect you as a site? That type of thing. and members. So a lot of people, young people, don't really know that they're counted as an audience who can be a member. A lot of times it's an expectation that they have to pay a lot of money in order to be a member, or sometimes people even think they have to have like a family in order to be a member for a family membership. So some simple questions that I would want to know if I'm seeking to be a member of your institution is, can I afford it? And if I can, does it pay for itself? This is a very common phrase for memberships is, you know, if your admission is $15, you can say, oh, it pays for itself in 4 visits. So then you can kind of calculate, is your commitment to the site matching the commitment of the membership? It's been proven in a lot of studies that young people, whether it's millennials or Gen Z, it's very important to them that they're supporting something that is good. So whether it's just stating like, hey, through our membership fund, we've been able to refurnish this, or hey, because of our membership fund, we've been able to provide these programs. You know, what is the membership fund really going towards? What is my membership benefiting the museum? And ways that you can kind of seek out members are through a pamphlet. So like a trifold pamphlet where like 2 panels give you information on the institution and the membership. And then the third one is an application thing that you can just fill out and submit it to be a member. You can also have an online form on your website or online. Just make sure that there's a secure payment option available, or a personal invite. You know, if you're giving a tour and someone is really invested, you can mention, hey, have you ever thought of being a member of our institution? You know, this is what it's like. This quote, it just reads, young adults tend to invest in products that elicit emotional response and support companies or organizations that feel connected to. So just keep in mind that when you're asking someone to be a member, you do want to make sure that there is a little bit more of a personal connection with them in order to really get that engagement and that yes. And for board members, this is also someone who will be engaged with your site already, especially if it's your first one. I'd say first, go to your board, you know, and really ask yourselves to answer truthfully. Will a younger member be respected? You know, will we want to hear their opinions? Do we know anyone already that would be helpful to have on our board? And how can we show them respect? In this way, it really means, what other specialty do we want, not just their age? So what knowledge do we think that they can bring and that we'll listen to? Is that how we can show them respect, instead of just having someone show up because they're 25 and they seem to be a good person? You know, is there something that they can actually provide for your institution? Because believe it or not, a lot of times young people want to do good and they want to be a helpful addition to your site. Also to your board, you know, if you all have had the same board for the past 3 years and having a young person is new, are you able to move the meeting that you've always had at 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoons to a different time, so that if someone with a different schedule could make it? So then you go up to the person that you're thinking about having as a board member and ask them, would you be interested? And tell them outright, hey, do you think you could help us with this project? Hey, we're really struggling to digitize some collections, and I know you have good experience and you seem to be interested in the museum. So do you think you could help us with digitizing the collections? No? Or we have this opening on this committee. Is that something that you would be interested in participating in? Just be honest and clear. And, you know, some people might say, sorry, I can't. But a lot of times this is seen as a respected and honored position. And so people will try to work with you and see if they can actually make this a beneficial relationship as a board member. Next slide. Now we're at provide. So those are just different ways to propose to your person. And next, this is, you know, how you will provide or what you will provide to the person.
Okay, so for provide, I like to think of this section as what are you offering? What do you have to offer to a younger person involved in your organization? So starting first with volunteers and interns. Right now, the museum field is extremely popular. Within the United States alone, there are nearly 400 different degrees in museum studies, public history, historic preservation, and things of that nature. And of those programs, there are 17 in Ohio. So you have at your disposal a lot of young college students who are looking for opportunities to have hands-on experience in your museum. So especially as a small museum, you offer so much to a young person interested in museum work, because they can have opportunity to participate in many different areas of how your museum operates. So next slide. So I wanted to give some examples. I've had experience as a volunteer, an intern, a board member, and a member. And I just want to share a little bit about what attracted me to these positions and how this could maybe benefit you when thinking about what you're providing to a young person, because you do have a lot to offer. So in college, I was vaguely interested in museum work. And so I decided to one summer reach out to my local historical society and see if they had any opportunity for me to volunteer. And this was going to be a way for me to figure out if museums were a good fit, if it was something I wanted to do. And this is an all volunteer run organization. So they have some volunteers who come in for a few hours every couple weeks. And I just came in at the same time as their already established volunteers, and I helped with ongoing projects. So as you can see in the top picture here, they were doing an exhibit about wedding gowns. And so I helped with some of the organization of that. And so I was really an extra set of hands. I also helped the historian down in the archives with her organization of their photograph collection. And this experience was really fascinating to me because it was, I was obviously helping, but I was learning so much from these hours I spent with the Historical Society. Not only did I have these experiences of setting up exhibits and helping with that aspect, but working in the archives, I learned a lot about my hometown that I didn't know. And I like to include this photograph from the archives of Strongsville. If you're familiar with Strongsville at all, you know that it is extremely commercialized, every box store you can imagine. And that's how I've known it my entire life. But less than 50 years before I was born, it was farmland. And that blew my mind when I saw that. And it made me even more interested in volunteering and finding more things out about this place that I've lived in my entire life. So this was a great experience for me to kind of get my feet wet. And it's different than an internship, which next slide. The main difference with an internship and a volunteering, which has already been touched on before, is that one is more of a time commitment. So internships, one should be paid and then also require more hours. It's almost like a full-time job. So the following summer, after volunteering and realizing this is something I wanted to do, I had an internship at a local historical society, and this museum has a full-time director. And so with this full-time staff person, he was able to take care of a lot of the daily runnings of the museum, and that allowed me as an intern to learn from him and to design my own internship. So with this local historical society, I got to try out a lot of different things in just a 2-month period. So I gave tours, I applied for a state grant, I helped rehouse some of their photograph collection, and I even curated a summer exhibit. And this would not have been possible at a larger museum. And so something I was thinking about too is how did I find these different experiences? And so for volunteering, that was me reaching out and seeing if maybe they had opportunity and needed help for volunteering. They hadn't done any advertising on their part, I reached out. For this internship, it was more word of mouth. So I had met the director during a college class. He came and spoke to our class, and then I connected with him and tried to figure out if this was a good fit for me, and it was. So this was a great experience for me. I learned a lot from this mentor I had, and then I also contributed to their organization with some of their ongoing projects and new projects that they hadn't considered before I joined their organization. Next slide. So thinking about volunteers and interns, what are you as a museum providing? So in general, first you're providing pay. As I mentioned, With interns, they should be paid. Increasingly in the museum field, it is ethical to pay them for their labor. They're struggling young professionals and they could really use some help. And you need to make sure that you can afford to pay an intern. If it's not within your budgetary constraints, that's okay. Then try recruiting volunteers. Start with that and then see if over time you can build funds to be able to pay an intern. Next. The next thing you're providing is staff. So if you're hiring an intern, you need to have a staff member or a volunteer who is able to supervise that person, usually for at least 20 hours a week, if not for a full 35 or 40 hours a week. So this can be really hard for an all volunteer run organization to have someone voluntarily spend a full-time job supervising this intern. So you need to make sure you have these staff capabilities to handle volunteers and interns, and make sure that you're giving them something too with this mentorship. And then the last thing you're really providing is experience. So as I started out my part of the presentation, there are a lot of young professionals in museum degrees, and they're looking for that hands-on experience. And there's also people, particularly volunteers, that, I still volunteer at the local historical society, despite having, jobs or internships and fellowships within the museum field, because I'm interested in continuing to learn about my town's history. So think about what kind of experience, have a conversation with whoever you're having as a volunteer and intern, and figure out why they wanted to become involved with your organization and what they hope to get out of this experience. So then you can meet their expectations. And also in many ways, you're giving them a resume boost. So you're adding a line to their resume and also something that they can talk about in interviews. I still talk about my volunteering and interning from a few years ago in interviews, because they were such valuable experiences for me to understand how museums work. Next. So thinking next about members, we've talked a little bit here and there about what this demographic is. So when we're saying young people, what do we really mean? So millennials in general are considered born between 1981 and 1996, and Gen Z in general are considered to be born after 1996. I like to think of this less so in numbers and more so thinking, if I'm seeking out an intern that's in college, an undergraduate student in college, that person is from Gen Z. If I'm seeking out maybe a young person who's new to their career, young professional, or maybe a new parent, a young parent with children, that's probably a millennial. So I'd like to bring up at this point, Museums and Millennials, Tips for Successful Engagement by Jacqueline Spainhauer. And this is a presentation she did for the Texas Historical Commission, and it's also, she has a book on the same topic. So she really debunked some of the myths that might surround this idea of involving young people, or maybe why don't young people want to be involved? And in actuality, they do, but there are potential barriers, starting first with the amount of hours they work. So in general, millennials are considered to be fairly financially unstable. They deal with student loan debt, stagnant wages, and increasing costs of living, as well as just working long hours. So they have to work a lot to be able to provide for themselves. They're young professionals. They're just establishing themselves in their careers. So how can you accommodate these limitations that they have? If you're holding particular events that are member-only events, are there ways that you can hold them at times when people who work a normal job would be able to still attend these types of events? So instead of holding them midday, are you holding them later in the day? If your museum's only open during weekdays, during work hours, how can you maybe bleed that into the weekends so that younger people who are working full-time could attend those types of events? Another thing to consider is, as I've mentioned, millennials don't have necessarily a lot of disposable income. And so they're spending their money very consciously, which is something that Chloe has also already touched on. So you really need to prove to them why you are worth their money. Why would they want to contribute money to your organization? Are you doing valuable things in the community that their money will directly contribute to? And then finally, there's a common myth that young people always want everything technology centered. And this is not necessarily true. I say this cautiously because it is important to have a website and an online presence on social media and things of that nature so that you're advertising yourself and you're getting your name out there. But when young people come to your museum, they're not coming there to be put in front of an iPad or a computer or something of that nature. They want to have a unique experience that helps them to escape from their daily life. So what kind of experiences are you creating that they're going to see that and they're going to say, wow, I want to be involved in that. I want to create a memory there. So really the bottom line with all of this, you can click one more, Amanda, is that millennials want exclusivity, experience, and nostalgia. They're looking to make memories through your organization. And if they can make extra special memories as being a member, then they're more likely to pay for that membership. So at this point, I'd like to bring up a membership example that I've always thought was really interesting and targeted towards younger people, but I think people of all ages really would be interested in this membership. At the Massillon Museum, they offer a pet membership. And this is very affordable. It's $10 or $5, depending on what type of membership level you get for your pet for the year. And with this membership fee, you receive some museum swag. So you can get a sticker with the museum logo on it. You can see in the photo with the dog, he's wearing a bandana that says Mass Mew for the museum. And then more importantly, pet members have access to 2 exclusive events each year. So a lot of millennials, young people, have pets, and these pets are in a lot of ways like their children. And to be able to go to these special events where they can spend time with their dog, make memories with their cat, and also bring their pet to a museum, which is always seems a little bit illegal. It's something that's interesting, it's something that's unique, and it's something that I know if I live closer to that museum, I would want to pay that membership fee. And then also, if I was paying for a membership for my pet, I would probably pay for a membership for myself as well. So it's some way to get people involved as members in sort of a backwards way. Next slide. So thinking about what you provide for members, you're providing first affordability. So you want to make sure that your membership isn't overpriced, maybe consider what other organizations around you that are similar, what they're charging for their membership, and that this is something that people could feasibly give money to and not break the bank. You're also providing access. So how come I'm going to pay to be a member? What special privilege is that going to give me as a member that I don't have as just a visitor who comes for a tour one day? Why would I pay to be a member? So you need to consider what kind of special events you can hold or programs, or there's usually like a discount in the gift shop and things of that nature that are giving members different access than your everyday visitor. You're also providing memories. So again, thinking about those unique experiences that you can provide. Young people want to create these memories with their kids, their friends, and even their pets. And you want to think about what kind of programs and events you're putting on that you are offering this opportunity to your members. And finally, you're providing connection. So as we've touched on, millennials want to give their money to an organization that they know is doing good in the community. So if you're showing that you're well connected with your community, you're doing things that benefit the community and your mission, and you're upholding your mission, and people know what your mission is as well on a website or wherever that may be, then they're more likely to want to give money to help support you in making that mission possible every single day. So think about how you're connected with your community and how this is going to encourage people to be a member and give money to your organization. Okay, finally, I'll talk about some aspects of being having a young person on your board. So just like with an internship and volunteering, this is a reciprocal relationship. So you want to consider what you're providing for this board member, and also why they would want to be on your board. And when you start to think about this, you have to consider why a young person may not want to or may not be able to be on your board. So it is a big commitment. Particularly, it can be a big commitment or expectation of fiscal contributions. So as Amanda mentioned, having doers, donors, and door openers can make this more possible for a young person to be part of your board. Maybe they can't make those big fiscal contributions, but they can help out volunteering more frequently, or they can help connect you with important people in the community, things of that nature. Another thing to consider is, of course, time commitment. So you have to have usually monthly board meetings, and possibly other different events that board members are expected to attend. And so you want to think about how you can make this fit into young people's schedules as much as possible. So if they're already juggling a job, potentially a long commute, and maybe family commitments when they come home, what are ways that you can make sure that this board meeting isn't adding another stressor to their lives? And then finally, this has also been touched on, but a hostile environment, I cannot stress this enough. If your board is not welcoming to a young person, then why would they want to spend their time being a part of your board? So that'll lead me into my example. So I've been a board member of the Wayne County Historical Society in Worcester, Ohio, for about 2 years now. And this is an all volunteer organization. So their board is vital to their daily operations and how the museum stays alive. And so I joined the board my senior year of college as the secretary, and the board was very different back then. As the secretary, I was busy with my job of taking notes, and so I didn't have a lot of opportunity to contribute. But even when I did, it really felt like they didn't want my opinion. They didn't want my perspective included. As a college student, there were some people who were still resistant to this idea of having a college student involved in their board and the decisions being made at their museum. And so this was really hard for me to feel like I was actually a valuable member of the board. Jump forward a few years, I moved back to Ohio and I was asked to rejoin the board, and there's been a lot of turnover and it's a completely different environment. It's very welcoming. They're very excited to have everyone's perspective shared at board meetings, including a young person. And so this has allowed me to be more involved. As you can see in this photo here, I lead video productions for the museum. So I'm more of a doer, not a donor for the organization. And I also help with their search committee to find the museum's first director. So in this way, I'm helping out the Historical Society with my museum experience, and experience particularly that I've had as an AmeriCorps member. I get to help them with that as a board member. So in turn, I learn a lot of the ins and outs of how a museum is run. And this is just really something you don't get in a classroom. And so it's very valuable to me. And I hope and like to think that I'm also a valuable asset to them. So summarizing, what do you provide for board members? So again, inclusivity. Before you reach out, you prepare, propose to a potential young person as a board member, consider if you really should, if you have a welcoming environment on your board. Again, you're providing access. So you're pulling back the curtain and you're really showing this younger person how decisions are made within this museum. And this is experience that they're not going to get in a classroom setting. This is experience they get sort of on the job. And so you're really allowing them to be a part of that decision-making process. You're also providing flexibility. So be accommodating to any limitations that young people may have financially and in terms of time. If there's a way, maybe you could provide virtual board meetings every once in a while to accommodate for those who maybe have a long commute or have young children they have to take care of at home in the evening and can't attend a board meeting. And finally, you are providing status. So we've mentioned before that being on a board is it's a pretty big deal. It shows that that group and that organization respects that young person's voice, and they see them as a valuable and reliable member of their organization enough to be on their board. So you are really offering an opportunity for them to be in a leadership role. And again, it is a resume boost, but it is also something that is a really impactful and meaningful way to give back to their community. So now I'll hand this off to Ingrid to talk about praise.
Hello. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about praise and why it's important to show appreciation for those who are giving their time, because the grand majority of museum organizations and institutions exist because of the people that freely give their time. And they often do so because they want to be improving their community, and they deserve to feel valued for the time that they are giving. So why do we show appreciation for those who give their time to our organization? Well, this is not, of course, an exhaustive list, but this is a couple points. That we show appreciation, recognition, because it leads to people feeling that their work is valued. And by doing so, it creates good social interactions in these workplace environments. It strengthens the relationships, not only between staff members, but also staff and volunteers, and between volunteers and interns, and so forth. And there's a positive relationship that exists between gratitude and work engagement. If you are feeling more confident in your abilities, you feel that the projects you're working on are of value to the organization you are helping, you're going to put a little bit more effort into it because you know that it's important. And of course, this is going to help with anyone's self-esteem and confidence, and just create an overall sense of optimism in the organization, helping with workplace unity, and overall, if everybody feels that their work is contributing to something greater, the hope is that it's decreasing any sort of turnover or a large amount of turnover, especially with volunteers. And especially when it comes to self-esteem and confidence, I'll get into this a little bit more, and I know we've touched on it, but for a lot of interns and volunteers who are younger, this is their first time being part of this type of museum environment, perhaps. And so giving them the space to grow and the space to feel that their abilities are being noticed and seen is really important to potentially their continued engagement in the museum field. So now that we know why it's important, how do we show appreciation? And some of this is a little bit self-explanatory, but it's worth talking about. In this slide in particular, deals a little bit more with the emotional support side of things. So we might understand that articulating praise is important, but sometimes it doesn't come as often as it could. And so being aware that when somebody does a good job on a project, or is a really creative thinker, or is just a really good team member, pulling them aside and telling them that can be really impactful, not only again to self-esteem, but also just knowing that they are part of something and that their effort that they're putting into it is being noticed. And giving feedback and being a guide kind of goes along the same line, where feedback, again, can be one of the reasons why people come back. Volunteers might come back to your organization because they've verbally heard from maybe a staff member or supervisor that they, they're filling a place, in the organization. They are doing a skill set that maybe nobody else really has pinholed at the moment, and so they know that they know maybe ways to improve what they're working on, or they're just getting the positive kind of affirmations that they are doing a good job. And constructive criticism kind of goes along those same lines too, because again, this is a learning experience often for younger people, either high schoolers or college students. So not only showing them, or not only praising them, but also giving them kind of the tips and tricks and of the trade as well, and not being harsh necessarily and correcting if they make a mistake, but giving them kind of that feedback that they need to improve upon their skill set. And also just providing thoughts, making sure that ideas are able to kind of flow back and forth really builds a lot of trust and reassurance. Again, being open-minded to their ideas, it shows that you value their opinions. And when you create that kind of inclusive environment, it helps, especially maybe shyer, quieter people, feel that they are able to share their ideas and opinions and that they'll be equally heard amongst everybody else's. And ignoring small mistakes, of course, this depends on circumstances, right? But especially if someone is new, allowing for small mistakes to happen because they will, accepting it, and finding ways to move forward without this feeling like it's going to really hold them back or hold your organization back. In doing that shows that you appreciate their hard work and trust that you know they will do their best. And so then this slide is talking a little bit about some of the other things aside from emotional support that are ways of showing appreciation. And so this can be like creating fun traditions, providing meals, doing a pizza party to celebrate the end of an exhibit going up. The Southeast Ohio History Center has events like our 5th Tuesday. So we have our staff meetings on Tuesdays. And whenever there are 5 Tuesdays in the month, which happens every once in a while, on the 5th one, we will go out and get coffee somewhere and have our staff meeting, outside of our building. Of course, pandemic has changed that a little bit, but we still try to find ways of doing something a little different. It could even be taking a field trip to a local historic site and learning about it for the afternoon. Another way of showing appreciation and support could be offering up letters of recommendation, and this is certainly applicable if you are a supervisor and you're supervising interns or volunteers, again, and young people who are trying to get their feet wet and see what this museum field looks like. They may ask you for recommendation letters, but it's even better if you can, reassure them up front, like maybe at the end of their internship, hey, I think you've done a great job. Please let me know if you would like me to write you a recommendation. And as we've mentioned a little bit before, providing incentives can also be really great if you are able to provide financial assistance of some sort or be able to fund them in some way. That is wonderful. If that is not possible, at least finding potentially opportunities in the field or networking opportunities. And this can be as simple as, hey, I know people at this other museum, like I would totally recommend you to them if you would like further experience. And again, make it easy for them to give their time. So flexible scheduling is really very important. That's why we're all hitting it home. And then with permission, social media posts can also be a great way of highlighting someone's work, time commitment. This could be a long-term volunteer who's come in, every week for 20 years or something. Sometimes doing a social media post can be a great way of showing appreciation because it allows your wider community who look at your social media to see that you really care about the people that are putting in their time in your organization. So just a couple questions here. How do you create a welcoming environment? So right off the bat, stressing inclusivity and accessibility is really important. It's going to make everybody feel a lot more comfortable. This can be as simple as sharing pronouns. It could even be, being aware of any workplace behavior that is unhelpful and then trying to mitigate issues before anything escalates. Really just making sure that people feel comfortable and respected as a baseline is perfect. And then how do you show appreciation for the help and presence of young people in your organization? Again, we've touched on this a little bit, but giving them incentives and opportunities is a wonderful way of doing that. And in a lot of ways, especially if you are a supervisor and or a senior staff member, teaching them the skills of this trade is invaluable. And it's very tangible as well. As interns, you want to be able to come away with some sort of skill set. And so that is one of the ways that you can do that. And then also giving them your respect, trust, and time. So giving them enough responsibility to help them grow, having enough oversight, but then allowing them to work on things by themselves. And again, sometimes this can be quite a time commitment for anyone who is a supervisor. But know that, as we've talked about in AmeriCorps, what we end up doing is, and I do something, I will show you how to do it, and then you will be able to do it yourself. And so that's a good way to approach being a supervisor, and kind of showing them the ropes and then allowing some room to let them grow in their own skill set. So how do you encourage young people to see your organization as a place where they can meaningfully invest their time? Make sure that they have projects that pique their interest. That is one of the most simple things. If they feel invested in what they're doing, they will hopefully keep coming back. And again, if they have a specific skill set, make sure that they are able to use it. I know this is not always the case, but it will help them feel more included and help them feel like they really are kind of filling a niche in your organization. And then also articulate the types of skills they will acquire, and how they might be useful in the future. And this can be, you can really think outside the box here, because volunteers and interns who are coming in, they might not know if this is a field they necessarily want to stay in, but there are a lot of skills, not just, how do I preserve artifacts, but also how do I interact with the public? How can I help with our education program? It can also be things that have to do a bit more with technology or the digital side of things. So what kind of skills might they come away with that are right, a little more outside the box? And then how do you encourage young people to continue to return to your organization? So again, everybody wants to feel that they're part of something, they're working towards a common goal, and they are making a difference. And so putting together events that celebrate these accomplishments can be a great way of doing it. Being vocal when somebody does something well is just baseline, a great idea, and then giving constructive feedback and encouragement when needed. So just a little bit about my intern experience at the Southeast Ohio History Center. Here I am, I think after my junior year of undergrad, and I was very excited that I handmade this little earring jewelry display thing. For me, I really enjoyed the hands-on side of it because I was exploring the museum world as a history major. And so kind of like Marissa, I wanted to see what it was like, and ended up being a perfect experience that allowed me to not only know how to preserve different artifacts, use our database, but also have this hands-on creative side of things too. And some of my major takeaways from being here at the Southeast Ohio History Center was the welcoming atmosphere that we had. Our current director has really worked hard to have this intergenerational workplace in terms of staff and volunteers and interns. So having volunteers that have been here for quite a while, to younger volunteers, to new volunteers who are older retirees. It just creates this atmosphere where everybody is really kind of helping each other and social, but in a good, what's the word? Productive way, I guess, where we're all kind of working on our own projects, but can really feed off of each other and ask each other questions. The other big takeaway was the skill set that I was able to build. And this is, again, not just understanding our database or designing exhibits, but also kind of the social side of things. How do I articulate what I'm doing here? And how do I build these different exhibit pieces, how it kind of pulled almost from my art history classes too, and maybe really think about kind of spatially, how do these objects look together? How do I arrange different exhibit cases? And I think that kind of multifaceted side of all of it really intrigued me and has kept me coming back. And part of this experience for me was working on independent projects and also working on team-based projects. I really valued kind of the exploration side of things that I had. I was able to work on projects that I enjoyed learning about and have the hands-on side of things as well. And it was really, really interesting to me to be able to apply what I learned in school to the real world. And overall, apart from all these other kind of perks of it, of the experience, it was really the first time, I think, when I was here over the summer, at some point during my college years, that I felt I had some sort of mentors in my life that were kind of in a sort of career environment, I guess. Because I was working alongside our director, I was working alongside our curator, and they put a lot of trust in me. They put not a whole lot, but a decent amount of responsibility on me, to where I was kind of their right-hand man when we would be putting up exhibits. And they valued my opinion. They would ask me questions about what I thought. And so I felt really included, and it gave me a lot of confidence that I should continue with what I had started working on. And hence, that's why I kept coming back to volunteer, because I felt like I was valued and that this was a good environment for me. Yeah. So just going on to our conclusion, wrapping up some big ideas that we had. Being intentional is a big one. So having clear expectations, right? Who are you looking for? What roles can they play? And how might you need to prepare? Remember, this is a reciprocal relationship. So while you are gaining interns, board members, and volunteers, what are they going to get out of the experience? Not necessarily what can you give them, maybe in terms of the financial side of things, but what can you help them understand about the museum field? How can you kind of help them along and then have them grow in their own confidence? Also striving for inclusivity. So not just including, but listening to young people may expand and diversify your visitorship, as well as those who might want to get involved in the future. So if you have younger members, if you have younger volunteers and interns, not only might they bring in some really, really good ideas that you might want to listen to and consider, but they are also going to know those places in your community and connect you with those places in your community that might also help contribute to your own visitorship. They might get really interested in your organization now that the connection has been built. And then lastly, give praise and constructive feedback. And remember that there are multiple ways to show support, not just emotionally, but also kind of in a more physical sense too. And your organization is gaining more than just another set of hands. You are also the guide for these younger people that want to be involved in their community, that want to be involved in this type of field. And so in a way, it's kind of a big responsibility, but it's also, you're showing them the ropes and you're giving them the confidence that they can continue this type of work. So you're sharing the skill set, and yeah, that kind of wraps it up. I don't know if anyone else had anything they wanted to say as concluding thoughts, but thank you for tuning in.